Good morning, everybody. My name is Michaela Cleaver. I work as the SPS Programs Coordinator, and this is my 6th year of doing the internship. I'm so proud of all the work the interns have accomplished over this summer. They're a really great group, and I can't wait for you all to see all of the work they've done. I'd like to introduce Liz to give us a few welcome remarks before we get started today.
Hello everyone. I'm so happy to be here today. It's such a pleasure. Michael would be here, and I'm happy that he's not, because then I get to do it. He's traveling to Florence for the Coast Bar meeting, an organization he's been involved with for quite some time, and he's giving a talk there. So I get to do the honors on behalf of AIP, and I just wanted to note, as I was sitting there this morning, I'm like, what am I going to say that's not boring, right? It is the quadrancentennial of this program. Does anyone know what that is? 25 years of this program. And you've joined a cohort of about 200 interns who have been through the program in that span. That's just incredible. And what you bring to the program is a legacy that of a cohort, a strong cohort of the best and brightest that your generation has to offer. We are thrilled to have made that possible, to bring you together. All these brains in one place. Wow, I'm blown away. I'm blown away every single year. So thank you for choosing us. Thank you for choosing SPS, for giving your professional prowess to SPS and to this robust physical sciences community. I'm bursting with pride, and I want to give a shout out to Jack Hain, my good friend and mentor. Jack was in the education division, as we called it back then when we started this program. And he supported it this whole time, brought it through, made it an institution, along with Gary White, and of course, Brad Conrad, here with us today. And so anyway, I'm just going to thank you again, and it's my pleasure to turn the mic over to John Mather.
Well, thank you for the invitation to say a few words. I don't want to say a lot of words because you're the ones that have done the star work this summer. But anyway, I'm really tickled to see so many people who are going to go do great things. And so getting a shot at it through the summer, testing out the waters and seeing where you want to go. So I'm trusting that you've found something very exciting to work on this summer that may open another door for you. Found colleagues to work with who can help you do that. Found some ideas that you think are really cool to pursue, and the doors will open. That's my hope. So I've been supporting the intern program for the Mather Policy scholarships. So usually we get 2 or 3 a year to think about science policy, which I thought, well, how do we get that started? Well, I started a long time ago because Bill Foster, who's a physicist, was running for Congress. And okay, well, why are you calling me? Because I have a Nobel Prize. So what can I do to help? Well, I don't have the funds yet to support a whole lot of people, but I can try to recruit some young people who want to try this. So he got elected. He's still in office after many difficult campaigns, but he's our one physicist in Congress at the moment. There have been more in the past, and there can be more in the future. So one of our summer policy interns said that she was going to plan to become the president of the United States. Hasn't happened yet, but it's not impossible. So we have an immense momentum forward. A lot of scientists and engineers and doctors and nurses are running for office these days, and so it's a chance to really make a difference in our world. So thank you for taking on the challenge. But whatever it is that you want to do, it's important. Thanks.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you so much. I'd like to invite Erin Lavick, Director of SPS, up to start moderating for us. She'll be introducing all of the interns as they come.
Now I see why you asked if I was doing it, because I'm all the way over here. All right.
Clickers here, and I'll be controlling back up.
So I'm going to introduce our first intern, but before I get to that, I just want to acknowledge that the whole reason the symposium is happening, the whole reason the internship happens is really Michaela. And this is Michaela's last time leading the internship program, which is incredibly sad for us, but joyful because you've done a remarkable job. And we are so exceptionally grateful for all of your work and your heart and how much you care about students and science. It's really incredible. So if it's okay with you all, what I'd like to do is just introduce the intern, just tell you to come up and let you guys introduce yourselves and your projects, because I've heard you guys talk. You're amazing, and I don't want to sit here and chatter all afternoon, and I will completely do that if I stand up here. So, Amelie, are you ready?
Hi, I'm Amelie Hine. I'm a rising senior at Hamilton College, double majoring in physics and history. And today I am going to be talking about my theme for the summer, which was tracing women's involvement in the defense industry in the Cold War era and beyond. Okay, so just to give a little background on my history project, World War II saw an unprecedented rise in women in technical roles and in the physical sciences. Here you can see, this is an NBLA picture from the Niels Bohr Library and Archive. These are Caltron operators at an electromagnetic isotope separation plant, so they were working on the Manhattan Project during World War II. And this is really the first time that the national government is thinking about women in the physical sciences as a national security prerogative. And that's going to become really important later on. So here we can see the national government really trying to encourage women into the physical sciences. But the war ended, and the political climate after World War II wasn't necessarily very friendly towards women in the physical sciences. So there was a massive demobilization effort. All the troops came back from the war and needed jobs. There was the GI Bill, so men were moving into education, often in the physical sciences, which unfortunately pushed a lot of women out of that in higher education. And at the same time, the threat of communism is rising. And a lot of feminism movements and movements for racial equality were cast in terms of communism, and so they were less effective. So women turn to technocratic feminism, which is a term that Laura Puaka, who I actually love her book, she is one of my biggest secondary sources during this period. She coins technocratic feminism, which is basically casting women in the physical sciences as a national security prerogative instead of casting women in the physical sciences as like a human rights sort of framework. So we're saying we need women in the physical sciences, not necessarily because they should be there because they're humans and need to be in the physical sciences as well, but because it would be a national security threat to not utilize their brain power. Okay. Imagine waves. So if we're thinking about this in terms of like feminist historical theory, there's the first wave of feminism, which we really know women are entering into the physical sciences, and then we know what's happening to them during World War II. And then we also know what's happening to them during the second wave of feminism, which is all the way in the 1960s. But what Laura Puaka's book explores, and what I really wanted to focus in on this summer, was understanding what happens in between those two waves. And that's where we find technocratic feminism. Just imagine waves. Okay, so I spent most of my summer in the archives. A lot of my research happened at the manuscript division in the Library of Congress, and I also spent a lot of time at the Niels Bohr Library and Archive, which is where my internship was housed. So I started by looking at Miriam Young, who was a woman who worked on the Manhattan Project and then right after the war went to work for Western Electric. And I really, really thought that Miriam Young was going to be like the star of the show this summer. She is all the way until, like, she's employed from 1945 until 1983. And so, like, this really seems like it's the period when technocratic feminism is on the rise. Unfortunately, as you can see here, the Library of Congress only had one manuscript box on her, and it mostly had material related to her World War II things. So I went back, okay, imagine circling text that looks very, very pretty. Okay, so then I went to the Niels Bohr Library and Archive, and I came across the story of Irene Fisher. Now, Irene Fisher fled the Nazis during World War II, came to the US, where she was then hired by the Army Map Service. She was trained in Vienna as a mathematician and really disagreed with the established shape of the Earth. Her work would later be fundamental to founding GPS. And she had a really interesting take on technocratic feminism. So I wanted to understand how Laura Puaka's wide sort of theory of technocratic feminism was impacting women on an individual level. And she was coming in from the outside as sort of an immigrant looking in on the system. And she saw technocratic feminism. She was maybe a bit ahead of her time, that's what I should say. She really thought of things in terms of sort of the later second wave movement instead of technocratic feminism. She really believed that she deserved to be there and had that internalized. So for her, technocratic feminism was really just a strategy. Okay, again, imagine very aesthetic text choices. Okay, so then we come across Gladys West, who grew up in the Jim Crow South, and she was hired by Dahlgren Naval Proving Grounds in 1956. And she was also a mathematician who then turned the original theories that Irene Fisher had come up with into code and then like made GPS sort of a reality. She gave it the foundation. She had a very, very different take on technocratic feminism than Irene Fisher had. She was coming at this from an insider perspective, and I think sort of really needed the encouragement that technocratic feminism was giving her. She didn't necessarily believe at the very beginning that she deserved to be there. And I think technocratic feminism sort of gave her a rationale that then, as you can see throughout her life, she also encountered second wave feminism. She really picks that up in the 1970s. Okay, and then my final sort of side project of the summer was looking at the Equal Rights Amendment, which is sort of like the end of technocratic feminism and the transition into second wave feminism. And I wrote an Ex Libris Universum article analyzing the ERA controversy in the AAS, and that is coming soon. Okay, and so now let's look at the second part of my summer, which was doing oral histories. So at the very start of my summer, I had the privilege of looking at Megan Povey's oral history interview. And I did an AIP weekly historical newsletter highlighting Povey. Povey's really interesting because unlike most people who have their PhD in something defense related and then go into defense for the rest of their lives, Povey decided that she was a pacifist and became like a brilliant food scientist instead. So that's sort of one reaction that women can have to the defense industry. And then I created sort of a mini archive. So I was looking at women in Northrop Grumman. I looked at Feifei Lian, Jeffrey Yi Madera, and Ashley Daniel. And I created a mini oral history archive. I can't really go over too much of this information because a lot of it is under copyright, but they have really interesting stories that I'm hoping you all will be able to see on the NBLA in the next couple of years. So thank you. Any questions? Yes. Nicole.
How did you choose who to do your oral histories on?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back real quick. So in oral history, a lot of the purpose is to diversify the archive. You get to see people's stories in a way that they've sort of never been seen before. So I wanted to get a lot of diversity in my mini archive and highlight voices that haven't really been seen before. So when I was looking at Feifei and Jeffrey, both of these people were born outside of the US and then came here, were able to achieve their security clearances, and then went on to work in the defense industry. I also wanted to create sort of like a diversity in age ranges. So Feifei is at sort of an early to mid-ish point in her career. Ashley is at sort of a later point in her career. She's probably at the peak of her career right now. And then Jeffrey is very recently retired and sort of looking back on her career. So that was some of the thought process. Also, part of it is just who responds to your email. But, but I did want to sort of get different angles.
Okay. Hello. My name is Nora Hicks. I just graduated from North Carolina State University with a bachelor's in physics. This summer, I was an operations analyst at CAPE, which stands for Cost Analysis Program Evaluation. And today, I will be talking to you about base operations support, otherwise known as BOSS. So imagine you're an investor for a $1 trillion company, and you want to know how your money is being spent within the company. But each department within your company has a different way of tracking how they spend their money. That would be difficult to see where your money's going and be difficult for the departments to be transparent with you on how they're spending your money. And so establishing a way to standardize this process would become really crucial. And that's what I strive to accomplish this summer. So as is common in most briefings, I will begin with a bluff. So that's bottom line up front. So base operation is the money it takes to keep a military base running smoothly. Things like IT, utilities, et cetera. Base operation funding is tracked using a PE code or program element. This is a number that kind of just says, okay, this money's being spent on this item. There are hundreds of PE codes. So establishing a way to track these PE codes becomes super crucial. The challenge is that each service or military branch has a different way of using these PE codes. So the PE codes are different between the different military branches. For example, Navy may have 27 PE codes to describe IT, whereas another department may only have one to describe their funding for IT. This is especially important to be able to quickly track this information in June and July, which is what season I was in while I was interning. This is the program budget review. So the different services will present their 5-year future spending plan. And so this says how I'm going to spend my money for the next 5 years to accomplish our goals. And so during this time, we need to be able to quickly evaluate 3 main things. That's the executed money. What did they spend in the past? The required money. What minimum money do they need to accomplish their goals? And their program money. What have they planned and allocated? So by being able to quickly understand these 3 phases, we can see, are there any shortfalls, and have leadership fill in these gaps before they become a problem. So I took the data that I received straight from the services, which contain past spending, the required money they needed for the next 5 years, and their planned money. And I tried to categorize these PE codes so that I could look systematically at how they were spending their money. This would create a clean and standardized data set for easy analysis in the future. So the data I received began with the PE code and a PE long name. You can see here that all these PE long names all describe different things, and they're kind of long. So for example, enterprise computer storage, that's IT, but it also might be abbreviated, put in all caps, have different acronyms in there, and that can be confusing. So I put it under the large category, IT. And so if you can see on the right-hand graph, the left-hand graph, we have one consistent PE code for IT. So this IT PE code showed up across all the services. And so you can see, okay, spending is between, say, 50 cents and $1 across the different branches. But if we look at all PE codes that might be related to IT, we get a completely different picture. Now spending ranges between $1 and $2. And for Army, this is double the amount of money we initially thought they were spending. So when only looking at the one consistent PE code, we're not really getting the full picture. And so this points out how crucial it is to make sure you're categorizing the data so you can get a full picture and a better understanding. Another reason this is important is it just simplifies looking at the different categories of how it's being spent. So if we were to look originally at the data, there would be hundreds of different sections within this pie chart. It's kind of hard to track and be able to eyeball where money's actually going. But if we looked at this graph, we can see, okay, there's only 8 main categories. There's definitely some portions that are making up the most of the spending. So an example would be, say, dogs. So my broad category is dogs. But on this graph, I would see golden retrievers, mixed dogs, poodle dogs, wiener dogs. They're all dogs. I don't really need to know what specific type of dog, and if I need that, I have the data to go back to. But just saying, okay, they're spending this much money on dogs. That would be really important to be able to quickly identify that during the cycle. Another reason this analysis is really important is because it helps identify gaps in the funding. So by grouping it by category, we can see, is there specific areas where maybe there's not enough money? Or are there areas that seem fine? So we can see, where is it balanced? Where might there be gaps in the spending? So this summer gave me the opportunity to learn a lot about the defense budget cycle. This is a cyclical cycle that happens every year. It's very complicated. There's lots of things that go into it. So it was really interesting to learn about this. I also got experiencing translating raw data into something that's more clean and understandable. And so coming from research, I always was analyzing my data or someone else in my lab, but having data that was given to me by someone not in my department that I couldn't necessarily go and ask them questions on where this data came from, that was something that I had to learn how to overcome. Again, data cleaning and normalization was a skill that I developed through this and building visuals to tell a clear story. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, so Kate, in the organization chart, CAPE kind of sits up and off to the side. And so a lot of times we have the people from the different military branches giving us information, and then it's up to us to follow up with them. So for example, if I have a piece of data and I'm not understanding it, I have what's called a point of contact. And so I'll reach out to my point of contact who is in that military branch. And I'll say, hey, I'm not understanding this data, can you help me figure it out? And so they'll find who gave them that information and go down the series of chains like that to figure out the source, and then I'll have a meeting with them and sit down and talk with them. Also, if you remember, I said June and July, it's part of the program review cycle. And so during the cycle, we have weekly or bi-weekly meetings with the services to sit down and say, this is what I'm doing, making sure you're on the right track to kind of prevent any miscommunication. So it's a lot of, they're talking to me, I'm talking to them, we're talking together, back and forth.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm Daniel Wilson. I just recently graduated from Wichita State University. And today I'm going to be presenting the Careers Toolbox and making it a true digital experience. So, first thing you might be asking, what is the Careers Toolbox and why would change be necessary? The Careers Toolbox is a valuable NSF-funded resource. It was developed about 10 years ago. However, currently it's an 80-page PDF document. It contains some outdated information, and it's just not very accessible. Not very many people know about it. For example, in the 2025 intern focus group, only 2 out of 10 people were even aware of its existence beforehand. But the idea is to implement the Careers Toolbox onto a digital platform to make it to where we can promote it to undergraduate physics students and mentors, professors, and increase accessibility and visibility. So who also uses the toolbox for what? We did a poll in 2023 to 2025 of about 1,000 people, and also we did allow multiple selections, so the percents are not going to add up to an even 100, but nearly half utilized it as course material, so professors or mentors were assigning it to students. Almost an even third utilized it for their own personal use, and then about 13% were mentors assigning it to any other students. So we're going to go back to the foundational work and talk about what was done in the very beginning. So the 2025 intern ran focus groups, drafted advisor surveys, and started early sketches for the web development of the Careers Toolbox. As you can see right here, he developed a couple of early sketches of tools, for example, just Tool 1 and Tool 2. So Tool 1 is more focused on career exploration. So you have the different sectors: engineering, research, education, and industry. And then Tool 2 is over informational interviews. However, we'll get to that a little bit later. But he was building these base layouts, and this helped me develop the flowchart that we utilize for the site architecture. So where do I come in? So when I started this project, I was a bit unsure of really where to begin, but I knew that there was significant development that needed to be done. So James, who was the 2025 intern, he asked the question of what the students were wanting from the Careers Toolbox, but I realized my job was to clarify exactly what he was looking for and answering, how do we actually practically build this? So with this, I started building a skeletal structure in the form of a flowchart to give an approximate layout of the site and to accelerate the development. So this is the flowchart that I previously have mentioned. As you can see, it's quite extensive. However, I do have a closer up picture on the next slide to just kind of give you a closer view. But this flowchart contains all 9 tools. As you can see on the very top, those color-coded bars are all individual tools. Those range from, like I was saying earlier, career exploration, interviewing, networking, and resume building, yes. But yeah, within it has a bunch of different downloadables, PDFs, and different workshops that you can do individually to kind of guide yourself on the right track. So when I was mapping this PDF, the original numerical scheme that the tools followed just kind of didn't really follow the logical journey that most students would typically take. For example, here, I did highlight some of the things that we just kind of felt were a bit off. For example, Tool 2 being informational interviews and Tool 9 being interviewing. Those are kind of on the opposite ends of the entire toolbox, but we kind of felt that those needed to be integrated together. So we conducted a survey amongst the interns here, and we just were trying to determine how the interns would prioritize these tools, rearrange the toolbox in favor of what the interns felt the prioritization needed. And we also felt that finalizing or mixing the resume and the CV tool kind of goes hand in hand, so I took the liberty of putting those together. However, that may change in the future. So next, we focused on the user journeys. The user journey was a small side project where we put ourselves in the perspectives of different personas that we would be assuming to utilize the Careers Toolbox. For example, we focused on undergraduate students, recently graduated students that are just entering the workforce, and then graduate students as well. The user journeys were used to test the integrity of the previously mentioned flowchart. It revealed some gaps in the chart that definitely needed expanded upon, but it also reinforced structure that was already built. Then the flowchart was revised based off of these developments. So the format of these user journeys follows the users, those personas. Then we asked what questions or what needs were they looking for whenever they access the Careers Toolbox. Then we wanted to list out what the current experience is whenever they interact with the toolbox. In most situations, it was scrolling through an 80-page PDF and just trying to find a really specific answer, but being overwhelmed with information. But the ideal experience is going to be streamlining it to a website that has very clear titles, very clear descriptions of what they're going to be seeking, and different subsections that will all be related to their corresponding tool. So after revisions, the order was kind of, some of these tools were pushed off to the right and then everything else was shifted left. So we moved interviews towards the end of the toolbox because I felt as if whenever you're doing all of these, for example, career exploration, experience gaining, networking, skills assessment, job searches, I feel like interviews goes at the very end of all of that, and logically that would make the most sense. But we did revise those. Then we rated each of these tools on a different difficulty scale, 2 being the easiest to implement, 13 being the most difficult to implement. So whenever we did this, we were just trying to gauge exactly what we were working with and figure out what was the most practical to start out with, just because it's better to start and complete something that may be rated as easier instead of trying to do 10% of a really difficult project and leave it for the next intern. I was primarily working on the organizational framework. When it comes to the content, I felt like a lot of it did still hold up even in today. However, there was just like anything that really needed revised was mainly like prior statistics from like earlier on, because I think the most recent iteration of the toolbox was from 2017, which is still 9 years old. So those statistics I would say still need updated, but that's going to be something that whenever development is actually like more ongoing, that would definitely be updated then.
Hi, so as the author of the Career Toolbox, quick question.
Yes.
If you were to add a new section, totally new, what would it be on?
That's a really good one. Public speaking. I feel like public speaking would be a very viable section, considering here I am right now, and I just feel that in any kind of sector, any industry, public speaking is always a very useful skill, and you can never go wrong with being a good public speaker. I'll answer the question. Networking. I feel like being able to meet all the people I have over the summer and being able to branch out a lot more than I ever have in my entire life, that has proven so beneficial to me. I feel like that in itself has made me a much better speaker, and being able to just get to know somebody can take you so far in life. And like being able, like for example, whenever we were at the board of directors dinner with all the like the interns and then the board, I did not anticipate meeting so many people that worked in so many different sectors, so many different industries, and like they all had completely different paths that they all took to lead to where they are, and you're not fully restricted to one path. So learning that, I feel, has proven to be the most beneficial piece of information I have learned this whole summer.
And it's not easy. I mean, you have to put yourself out there and be vulnerable. It's hard.
100% agree.
Skill, yeah.
Sorry, y'all.
Still troubleshooting?
Yeah, Zoom is giving me issues. Brianna's gonna try sharing on hers.
All good.
Yeah.
I
Sorry.
guess any more questions? I'm here all day.
So here's a
Oh, yeah. What's up, Nicole?
So, okay, so you took the last interns, like their work,
Mhm.
and you implemented it, and then you kind of made this flow chart for the next intern to use to actually put it together.
Yes.
Are you kind of just giving them the flow chart, or are you giving them like, this is my vision, or is that am I splitting?
The presentation still has some slides. Great question, though. I am excited as well.
Daniel, what was your favorite, if you were approaching the Careers Toolbox, which, like, tool would be your favorite?
There's a lot of them are all so very useful. I'll pick 3. I feel like I have like 3 top ones. I feel career exploration will be very useful in the future, just because that's the hardest thing. I feel like as a recently graduated physics student, it's so hard to narrow down exactly what I want to do in the future. However, as long as it's somewhat physics related, I think I'll be happy. And then I would also say resume building, just because of course that will be completely necessary for anybody, and I feel that will also be a tool that is heavily utilized by wide ranges of students, even physics related students. I feel like could possibly get some use out of that tool. And then interviewing is such a necessary skill, and I feel that will be one that will also be utilized extremely heavily by undergraduates and recently graduated students. Oh, we're back. Awesome.
Thank you for your patience, everybody.
Does this mean I have to do questions at the end as well? No, I'm joking. So Yeah, I would say I covered this slide quite well already. We just moved the tools over to the right. We merged the interviewing types of tools, and then we contemplated merging resume and CVs. We still haven't finalized that, but for my current sketch, they are merged. So, ensuring future development. So to make sure that the next intern doesn't have any issues when they start working on this, I've drafted up a sprint board, which is essentially a checklist with extra steps to ensure continuity of the project and to streamline the migration process so they don't come in with so many questions. So I developed this in Excel. It was shared amongst the employees that work on the Careers Toolbox, and it even includes a little legend of explanations of how the document works. So if they have any questions, they can just click to page 4. So utilizing the sprint board, logging the progress, it's expected to allow them to just hop straight into development without feeling too concerned about foundational work that I had to work on this summer. So here's a GIF that I utilized to just kind of show what is entailed in the sprint board. So all of the tasks are over here shown on the left. That's the legend right there. That kind of shows exactly what each portion of it means. But back to this, you can see there's different phases. So phase 0 is asset acclimation. Phase 1's easier tool development. 2, 3, 4 are the bulk of things. And then 5 is just QC. Just making sure every link works. Any redirects are completely acceptable. And then there's also a subsection that tells you exactly which tool is being worked on next to the objectives. And there's also extra spots for start dates, whenever you want to be completed. And then if the content needs to be reviewed by somebody, there's an extra slot as well for that. I swear it's not me. I am getting very close to the end, though. I think I have 2 more. Oh, yeah.
Do you think there's a role for AI in the Careers Toolbox to help filtering?
So I believe that we're going to try to mitigate usage of AI. Sure, it can definitely be practical and used, but I feel like being able to have students independently build the foundational work of their resume, their skill set, and doing all of this independently, I feel would provide more benefit to the student than them having to rely on AI usage. And I think, yes.
I was going to ask about the content,
Yeah.
actually, so this might not be something that's been done yet, but is it going to have something for internships like this and stuff like that? Because I feel like a lot of the skills and stuff that are on the Careers Toolbox are things that I've read about before, but coming in person and actually practicing it was more beneficial than anything.
Definitely, I can agree with that. But yes, it will include internships, potential. I believe we were wanting to include graduate school exploration as well. We were trying to work with Grad School Shopper a bit earlier there, but it just kind of seems like that might be falling through. However, we are planning to include graduate school internships, REUs, any kind of these programs to just benefit the undergrad. Oh man, I thought I was back. Man, I've gotten so many questions. Thank you guys all so much, actually. That's definitely kept me in it.
Yeah, sorry guys, this has not happened before.
So Daniel, are you finished with your presentation?
2 slides left. I'm sorry. Oh man, I've been up here for 15 minutes. Whew.
But you've been very charming throughout.
Thank you very much.
Okay, another skill that you can draw.
I was gonna, if you want to try to just pull it up as a PDF or something, that's okay.
Why don't you pretend that they'll never come back ever?
Okay.
You have to give the slides as if you were.
Okay, I could just do some improv. That's all good. Yeah. So where did I leave off? Oh yeah, sprint board. So as you saw the sprint board GIF. So on the next slide, it was discussing the skeletal structure of the website. I have actually worked on assembling bits of it in Brightspot. So currently, I have worked on the home page. Oh, I have worked on the homepage of the Careers Toolbox, so that will be so if you're on the AIP student site, which all of you have navigated before, you can click past this one. So, I guess continuing from there, we have the timeline of development. James, the previous intern, was working on these early questions, drafts, mock-ups, and held surveys amongst the interns. I developed the flowchart and sprint boards to start development, and then I kind of progressed a little bit into development. I do have drafts set for the next intern to start building off of. And then next year, the next intern will be able to utilize my flowchart, sprint board, and my mock-up to accelerate site development. And in the future, we will have the Careers Toolbox widely available for all undergraduates and mentors to be able to use. So, can you click for me? Thank you. So this is the homepage mock-up that I have currently developed. It has each of the tools listed. This is currently navigating to the networking page, which is already published on the AIP site. The other pages, they're not published, but they're currently set as drafts, so it doesn't navigate to anything just yet. However, this is kind of like a vision of what we're planning to have, hopefully next year, I would say. With the setup that I think we have on this sprint board, and now it just being a simple checklist for the next person to follow, I believe they would be able to have these tools quite well developed by the end of the summer. And I believe that is, next slide, please. Yeah, thank you all for your attention today. Special thanks to Sean, Paul, and Red Bull.
A quick nod to personal mission. So I'm sure you've read the mission of the American Institute of Physics is to advance, promote, and serve the physical sciences for the benefit of humanity. But as physical scientists, you'll start to appreciate and learn that each of you will have a personal mission to advance the field. And this is embodied by one of the biggest supporters that this program has had since 2009, I believe. John Mather has invested in this program, living his personal mission and believing that science has an incredible voice in policy. And policy informed by science is for the benefit of humanity. And he's put his time and energy and resources into this program for a long time. So I wanted to give a nod out to John to thank him for his investment in this program. He does this through interacting with you by making sure that we have 2 or 3 interns involved in this program. Every year in science policy, John Mather interns have worked with senators, with congressmen, with federal agencies, a real breadth of experiences. There is a whole career stream out there for science policy among your cohort. Well, that was terribly put. I'm just going to say that if you're interested in a career in science policy, you can, there's people I can connect you with, there's people John can connect you with, and others in this room as well. AIP runs a science policy fellowship to work a year in the State Department or to work a year in Congress after you receive your PhD. If you're interested, then please reach out and talk to us. Anyway, I will stop talking, and I will introduce Ethan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ethan, and I'm a rising senior at the University of Rochester studying physics and astronomy. This summer, I was the NIST Office of Advanced Manufacturing intern, and my abstract was titled Agency Manufacturing Ecosystem Analysis. Now, what I want you all to do is picture yourself as a legislator, and you want to tell your constituents more about the manufacturing effects. Where do you find this information? Well, you might look through different governmental websites and agencies, and you won't find as much as you'd like. Well, that's the problem, and here I am offered a solution. Now, the solution is to compile a database of federal manufacturing investments for a fiscal year. I personally did the fiscal year 24-25. And why do we do this? It's to increase accessibility of funding information and connect entities with resources that are otherwise unknown. Basically, we are compiling data to tell our legislators, to tell the public where their tax dollars are going. to abstract ourselves a little bit, why are we doing this? Well, we work under the umbrella of Manufacturing USA. Manufacturing USA basically compiles all of manufacturing, what we call advanced manufacturing. Now, when I say advanced manufacturing, I want you to think STEM. We are applying the STEM processes to be able to understand the foundation of manufacturing and how we can improve it. Manufacturing USA has 17 institutions. These institutions take different sectors of manufacturing and they break it down into the fundamental components. You can see here we have electronics, materials, digital automation, biomanufacturing, and energy processes. Take AIM, for example. AIM is in Rochester, so I get to know a little bit more. They have a member institute as the University of Rochester, but they also have other governmental institutions like NASA or West Point. Basically, they have member institutions that they are able to contact and help support in their manufacturing processes. Now, the process. I scoured the internet for public information and basically looked at websites like grant.gov and usaspending.gov and governmental websites. Basically, I'm looking for different bills and legislation passed by Congress appropriating tax dollars to different manufacturing processes. Now, these aren't always as clear as day. Scouring the internet does take a long time. Well, we can use archives and trails to find older legislative bills that might not be up to date on the current internet. White House Archive is a huge proponent of where I found a lot of this information for the 24 year. And when compiling this data, I sought two things: simplicity and organization. I want this information to be as readily as possible for anyone to access. And so you can see here on the right, I've broken it down into different topics and subtopics. On the top, we can see the different awards that have been handed out throughout this fiscal year. And we can see the main topics: advanced manufacturing, manufacturing, and biomanufacturing, kind of the overall picture. The subtopics are more in the weeds of what's going on here, whether it's workforce development, biofoods, optics. We take all different kinds of sectors and basically tell them this is specifically where your money's going. Now, where do grants come from? Grants come from Congress when they pass a bill. Now, this is for a specific technology or a specific research area, and it's handed to a respective agency. Our respective agency, obviously, is NIST OAM, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology's Office of Advanced Manufacturing, just like my title. Basically, we take this grant information and we put it out as a notice of funding opportunity. Basically, anyone can apply where they have to follow a strict guideline. This strict guideline ensures fairness, which I think is the most important part of the process. You have to follow a certain page, certain width, certain characters, certain processes. Everything has to be fair for everyone so that everyone has an equal shot at obtaining this grant. An example is the CHIPS Act. The CHIPS Act I use, a lot of you probably remember in the 2022 year. It was passed for advancing semiconductor manufacturing to help the United States grow and increase their manufacturing output. Now, what does this data look like? I wanted to make it as easy as possible for anyone accessing this data set to be able to understand it. On the left, we see the topics and subtopics, manufacturing and manufacturing technology. In the middle, we can see color-coded awards, like this one, this project call, from America Makes. And you can see who received it, which is Honeywell, investments, and the region. Now, the region is very important to our overall goal of trying to improve legislators' understanding where their money is going. Now, how do we show this information? Well, what we ultimately decided on was making an interactive map. All across the governmental website, you can find hundreds of interactive maps showing where your data, where your money is going. And this is no different. Now, my internship is not long enough to make a fully designed interactive map. It's just not long enough. So what I did was I took the sources that I used and made them easily compacted for a CSV file so that future data analysts can take this and produce an interactive map. On the top here, you can see the different total investments for a general audience, be able to produce this and show different people where your money is going. On the left, you can see the different regions that you might want to break down and different graphs about where your money is going. What I really want to highlight here is on the right-hand side. If you were to click on a certain state, you would be able to see each individual award that your state received. Now, why is this important? Well, if you want to tell your constituents about where your money is going, this is a different award. Now, another view you can take on that is imagine you're a manufacturer and you want to say, well, I need money. Well, where do I do that? Well, in the past, these are the grants that they've received. And coinciding with my data set, I produced a graph of links. So if you click on these, it'll take you to the link. And you can find out more information about where that money is going and how that money was used. Basically, we are ensuring more federal transparency and easier interactability between government and manufacturers. Thank you. Any questions? All right. Yes?
What's the biggest hurdle for accessing, so you have to go out and get this information and then you need to display. So what's the biggest hurdle for this project?
Yeah, what's the biggest hurdle I faced when doing this project? And the number one thing I would say is researching. The entire month of June, I was scouring the internet for different governmental websites, bills, laws, what we can find. And that's a very difficult challenge because our government is ever evolving. We're constantly getting new changes, new policies, new government, and they like to change things, right, very rapidly. Anyone who works in the federal space knows exactly how challenging that can be. And so the main challenge that I faced was being able to find this information and say, is this what pertains to what I'm doing, or is this something that has already been talked about, has already been used? But yeah. Anything else? Yes.
Did you happen to access USA spending?
Yes. So for those who don't know, so the question was, did I access USA spending? Now, for those who do not know, USA spending is basically the government's chance to be able to compile as much information as they can about their spending. Now, what this website does is that you are able to find different codes, different maps, different graphs, showing you where this information is going. Now, this is a very difficult process, and I can say that in my process, I used AI, and I said, how do I break down this information, and where can I find more information about this information so I can put it in my data set? But yeah, thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Faith Simmons, and I was an intern with Physics Today this summer. So you might notice that the title of my abstract is So You Want to Be a Journalist? And that's because that was a question I was asking myself a few months ago. I graduated with my bachelor's in physics in December, and I wasn't sure if grad school was the right path for me, but I knew that I loved to write. So I applied for this internship just to kind of get an idea of what journalism is and what my place might be. And so over the summer, I had a really great experience, and I actually got to publish 3 different articles with Physics Today. One is a backscatter about tooth enamel, and then I wrote a piece about the 50th anniversary of the Air and Space Museum, and also about the International Physics Olympiads. So I'm excited to share with you what I have learned. So first, just kind of an overview of what Physics Today is. So Physics Today, or PT, is the flagship publication of AIP. It's a physics magazine, and they reach a very wide audience. They reach students, educators, policymakers, and basically anyone with an interest in physics. And they also cover a pretty wide range of topics. These are just a few of their most popular, but it's not just physics research that they cover. They also cover the people doing the research or events happening in the physics community. So who is Physics Today? I pulled this very blurry photo from the internet, and you might notice that a lot of these people have the title of editor or editor of some kind. But they actually have very different jobs. So this summer I kind of learned what an editor is. And so a lot of the articles that Physics Today publishes are actually written by subject matter experts in the field. And then those pieces are edited by PT staff before being published. PT staff also write articles. Some people focus more on the research, and some people focus more on the community events. And then we have copy editors, proofreaders, and a digital media team. They also write about a lot of different kinds of stories. So I just wanted to go through a few of the common ones. You might notice some of these words from the top of the print magazine if you read that. So a feature is a longer format article that has a lot of interest in the community. And then a backscatter is a very short, image-centered piece. It's on the back page of the print magazine. And if you read the September issue, you will see mine. And then issues and events is what it sounds like. It's the community-centered things happening out in the world. A quick study is something that you could read over really quickly and understand the idea of something. And then search and discovery is those more research-focused pieces that are based off a paper or a recent discovery. And then opinions are typically contributed pieces. So I learned about the process of how does an article get from conception to publication. So it starts with a pitch, At Physics Today, we have 2 weekly meetings where this happens. The first is called a news pitch meeting, and it is what it sounds like. We pitch news and things that are happening in the community that we might want to cover. And then the other one is called an update huddle. This is where we get together and we kind of go over the workflow that we're in, and then we also talk about different papers that have been published recently that might be of interest. And then after that is research and reporting. Research in this sense is different than the research that we might know it, because it's not just reading the paper. Because a lot of these articles are outside of your field of study, you have to do a lot of the background work to understand the jargon of the field before you can start writing. And you have to have a really deep understanding of something to be able to write it in terms for a general audience. And then I also included reporting here because if it's not a research-based story, then this phase might look like doing interviews or going to events and just being in the field. And then writing, which is, in my opinion, the easiest step. And this is the one I enjoy the most. And then it gets edited before being published. And you might notice there's a little asterisk next to edit here, because there's a lot of it. And so we have a lot of different kinds of editing stages. This is the pipeline that Physics Today uses. My pieces went through some informal feedback before starting this process, but it starts with a top edit, which is when a senior editor at Physics Today reviews the article. And then it goes to copy edit. Copy edit is looking for things like grammar, sentence structure, and they're also doing some fact checking. And then it's signed off on, and then everything is proofed right before it goes to publication just to check anything that might have been missed. So these are some, there it goes. Okay, these are some examples of the edits that I had this summer. The image on the left here is some of the informal feedback I got from Tony, and that's her comments in the red. And then on the right is actually my piece about tooth enamel, and this is the top edit that Andrew gave me. So the purple is his corrections and changes, and then the blue are all things that I added after reading his comments. So the process of editing is more than going through and clicking accept changes. You have to actually read through and answer some of the questions that readers might have when they're reading through it. And then I got to do some interviews and some press tours. This was so fun. I had such an amazing time at these. The picture on the left is from the Air and Space Museum. I got to go to the press tour of that when they unveiled 5 new exhibits for their 50th anniversary. And it was really awesome. I got basically the whole place to myself. It was just me and a few other journalists. And they had museum curators at each exhibit to talk about how the whole process of creating the museum happened. So that was really awesome. And then on the right is actually the U.S. team for the Physics Olympiads. I went to their closing session at UMD, and I got to talk to the students and the coaches. And it's just been really great to be out in the field talking to people and doing this work. I also got to visit the National Academy of Sciences for the State of Science address, and I got to do some work with archives at the Niels Bohr Library. So my key takeaways from the summer. First of all, there are many pathways into science writing. You don't necessarily have to be a physicist to write about physics, and you don't necessarily need to be a writer to write about physics. A lot of people are actually somewhere in the middle. And so there are a lot of different ways that you can get involved in science writing if you're interested in it. And there are also a lot of different ways to approach science communication as a whole. Journalism is just one of many. So there is journalism and publishing in things like Physics Today and magazines. There are also blog posts, there's social media, there's actual outreach and being out there in the field doing stuff with education. And there's just so many different ways to get involved. And so that's been really great to see this summer. Feedback is your friend. If you notice my edits, I got a lot of feedback this summer, and it was great. The way that I view feedback has really changed this summer. I've realized that just because you get a lot of edits on something does not necessarily mean that the first round was bad. It just means that it can be better, and that's the case with most things in life. So actively seeking out feedback and getting that, constructive criticism back has been really helpful in learning just how to write and also just how to be a professional in the world of journalism. And then finally, I do not want to be a journalist. This is a fantastic result, though. This is what I wanted out of the summer. Because like I mentioned, I was kind of in between a few different fields, and I wasn't sure where I was going to be going. I knew that I loved writing, and I still do. I had a great experience. I loved everything that I did. But I think that writing is going to be somewhere around 30 to 40% of my job rather than 100%. I also realized there are a lot of things that I want in my career that journalism doesn't have necessarily. I really love student engagement and outreach and doing things with education. And I also love people management and project management and just working hands-on with things like that. But I learned so much this summer. I learned about journalism and about PT, but I also learned a lot about myself and who I am as a person and where I'm going with my career. One of the best things about this internship was to be here in DC by myself, because it was great to just kind of live alone and be in the city and meet so many people doing so many great things. It's really helped me understand how I fit into the world of physics. And then this QR code will take you to my blog posts. I wrote weekly blog posts this summer if you would like to read them. And then I will have 2 articles in the September print magazine, and I have 1 online right now. Thank you. Questions?
Did you ever cry when you got feedback on an article?
No tears were shed. I got a new method, though. I open up the laptop, I read the feedback, I close the laptop and walk away. And then I come back a few hours later and make the edits.
So if not journalism, what is next for you?
I will actually be going to grad school, so that has been decided over the past few months. I will be starting my PhD in physics education research at The Ohio State University. So, yes. And I also hope to stay involved with AIP and its member societies through committee work. Yes.
We did so many great articles, and one thing that we're trying to do as an organization, AIP, is how do we kind of share those stories? We can do across different mediums, or maybe do different newsletters, things like that. When you had your process up, you showed like pitch and development. At what point in that process do you feel that the idea is like solidified, and is that point we can make that aware to the rest of the organization that, hey, this is coming down the pipe, and maybe you might want to incorporate it in a different channel as well? Any thoughts on that based on your experience?
Yeah, so from the way that I understand it, a lot of that happens during like that update huddle meeting that we have. So we do pitch stories, but we also have an Excel sheet where we go through and look at what have people been working on, how is that going, where is it going, and then we set up the schedule for the next month or so.
That's pre-pitch.
Yeah, well, it's kind of alongside it, I would say. And, yeah.
So hi, I'm Janvi, and I was the AI Guide intern at Lawrence Livermore this summer. And we designed a course built around AI, even though the usual response to it in the classroom is to reject it or like restrict it. So when people talk about AI and education, they usually focus on 2 aspects. The first is to use AI to help students learn their existing subjects better. And the second is to help students learn how to use AI itself more efficiently. And through this course, we wanted to do both at once. So our idea was that AI could handle the calculations, the code, and the graphing. And so class time can actually be spent in learning concepts. And the students would learn how to verify the outputs, prompt the AI properly, and actually try to reason instead of focusing on coding. So most students already use AI, but they do not use it in the right way. They usually tend to use it as a shortcut, where they paste the question, copy the answer, and move on. They do not really retain a lot of information because they're not actively thinking about the problems. However, our approach uses the same AI tool, but in a different way, where we encourage students to use it as a thinking partner. We encourage them to ask questions and push back on the outputs so that they can actually understand where it's going wrong and reason better that way. And since it's customizable, the difficulty can be tailored to their own level, so it helps the learning process more. So this course will be taught to first-year students at UC Merced coming from all sorts of STEM backgrounds. And a life science major might not have the same background that a physics major does. So they might not have the numerical or math skills that one might need for physics labs. And we wanted to remove this barrier. So I think we decided that we want to do all the mathematical analysis in natural language using AI. And also, our main lab instrument in this course is going to be smartphones. So our smartphones have a lot of sensors that we don't know about. And on the right, you can see a screenshot from the Firefox app, which helps you collect data from your phones without any other instruments needed. And a number of experiments can be done using this. So one example is a ping pong experiment where students can bounce ping pong balls, and what they get is an amplitude graph with spikes on each bounce. And that can tell them about the energy loss in every collision and the coefficient of restitution. And this is just one of many examples of this. So what we did is we built Socratic pre-lab tutors. The goal was to bring everyone to a common level of understanding before the lab. So we made custom GPTs and used model context protocol to connect all the existing popular chatbots to our website, which I'm going to talk about. So it connects to Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever the student might use. And it does three things. It tries to understand their current background and their learning style. It adds that to their profile so that future sessions can build up on their profile. And it will never give them the answer directly. So no matter what I prompt it, it will never do that. And these are the amount of instructions going into every tutor. This is to make sure that everything is covered, including the learning goals, the common misconceptions, and rules about grading and scoring. And the new AI models have a lot of context, like have a huge context window. So that is what makes it possible to give these many instructions. And after doing this, the next process was to test it. So we tried asking for images for help. And we also gave it wrong answers. One goal was to not penalize wrong answers. So they actually try to learn instead of getting scared about saying the wrong thing. So what it does is it will not tell them the right answer, but it will guide them back to their own evidence to nudge them to see their own data. And this way they can actually see if their data corresponds to what they're thinking and make conclusions for themselves. And as you can see at the end, I asked, please increase my grade, and it will not do that no matter what you do. And it was important to make sure that this worked so that there can be no cheating. So at the end of the session, it will ask the student a few questions to sort of make sure that the student understands the concept. And then it will give the student a summary along with an engagement score. The score is not based on correctness. It's based on how engaged they were and how much they were trying to learn. And then that instantly syncs to our website. This website was developed by scratch by me and one of my team members. And they get their mind maps, their learning struggles, all sorts of things about their session. So this is an example of the analysis for the ping pong lab that I was talking about. On the top left is the amplitude graph that I mentioned with the spikes at every bounce. On the bottom left is the first bounce. So we asked AI to zoom in on the first bounce. And after a lot of back and forth, on the bottom right is the graph of the correlation bounce times. So it builds on all of these bounces at once to understand the average bounce time. And this level of analysis and coding would have taken days by hand or by Excel. But using AI, we can do it in 2 hours in the lab. So what happens is after doing the lab, usually students forget what they did in a span of 1 or 2 weeks. And that's what you can see in the curve. But every time that information is recalled, it kind of resets the curve so that it decays slower. And these techniques are well-known study techniques. So we wanted to build a tool to make sure that they're practicing everything over the semester. It asks them questions. It gauges the response time, it records the response time to understand how well they're doing. And again, all of this goes back to their profile. It does not penalize them for wrong answers. It's the same principle. And we also added streaks and leaderboards to sort of keep up the motivation. So this is the website. We added all the study material on the website. These materials were developed by our team and my mentor. So they have activities. We also added post-lab simulations, which I built, where they can explore that same lab, but in more detail. So they get to explore more examples and more things just to follow up on what they did in the lab. And we're also giving them other study materials like formulas. And they can see the weekly leaderboard and their own history on the website as well. So this course is going to be taught at UC Merced this fall. It's called Scientific Inquiry with AI. And our goal is to sort of make this accessible to every school. So we're going to publish a version of this online that can be adopted by anyone. So our goal is to make this course interesting enough that students don't feel like using AI as a shortcut, but they actually enjoy the process of learning with it. Here are some things I got to experience this summer. And I really enjoyed building the entire website because this was my first full stack project. And I would like to thank my entire team and my mentor. Thank you. Yeah, Brad.
What, if you could go back in time, 11 weeks ago, what's the one thing that you would tell yourself, the one sentence?
I guess I would tell myself to trust the process more, because with all the coding stuff, like a lot of it does not work in the first attempt, and we had to keep testing it. So I would just tell myself to keep going. Yep.
I'm just curious, the output as far as the tone and the personality of the tutor you have, is that consistent across models and across versions, so you don't have to worry about things like, older ChatGPT models being extra sycophantic and sort of getting in the way of actual constructive feedback?
Not really. Like, we try to test it with different models. So right now, ChatGPT has 5.6 Sol, which is the most advanced model. But we also tested it with like ChatGPT 4.2. Like, we try to make sure that every existing model works with this. And we made the documents the way they were. Like, they could have been our own program, but we made them documents so that they can be transferred to the student's existing preferred model. Yep.
I want to preface this that I'm not anti-AI. I mean,
Okay.
I like AI as a tool, but just thinking about it moving forward, are you going to teach in this type of class good habits with AI to prevent like water usage in the models? And do you plan on actually making some sort of like dedicated bot or model for this, or agent, I guess, because it has to go back through the list of commands every single time it makes that, because the way that we have AI right now, it goes back and reads your entire chat. So it's kind of wasteful whenever you're using like a Claude, which is made the newest Opus or Sonnet model. It's kind of wasteful because it's so open to what you're needing to do. So is that a plan going forward, or?
I don't think we're going to make our own agent, because that's just contributing to the environmental stuff even more. And going back to the point about it reading the entire context, I think it's important that that happens for the students, like overall conversation. If it was just reading your reply, it would not have any context about what you're saying in the beginning. So then it's kind of just like a one-off response. And about the environmental thing, like everyone has their own opinions. So, I mean, if students do not wish to engage with AI and do not want to take this course, they're free to. But this is just a way to make technology useful in the classroom instead of disruptive.
So Hello, everyone. My name is Madeline Stockeye. I am a current rising senior at Rochester Institute of Technology, where I study physics and illustration. And I was your SPS and AAPT SOC intern located at NIST this summer. And I'm going to take you through what I did this summer, which was science communications in kits, workshops, and teacher trainings. And if you're looking, what's a SOC? It's this thing. We'll get to that. So the kind of theme that I themed my summer around was this idea of how can we inspire students to think creatively and be curious about the world around them. So as a physics student as well as an art major, I'm really looking at how can we use art to teach physics, how can we inspire students to be energetic, to be hands-on, to just learn as much as they can in a creative way, because that's when kids get excited and they get invested and they go into STEM careers. So what did I do this summer? I had the 2026 SOC kits. I also participated in the NIST Middle School Summer Institute and the 2026 AAPT Summer Meeting in Pasadena, California. So generally, we wanted to base all of the education things that we did this summer in a physics education framework. So that's what I used was the ISLE framework, which it's the Investigative Science Learning Environment, which was developed at Rutgers University. And so basically it gives students information that they need to know and then gives them the opportunity to explore and develop their own understanding through observational experiments, testing those experiments, and then going back and recreating their own hypotheses or collecting more data or creating new hypotheses if they see that what they did was incorrect. And so it's kind of teaching physics in the giving students the opportunity to step into the role of a physicist themselves. We also baselined everything that we did with the Next Generation Science Standards, which is the standard for science classes K through 12 all over the country. So we wanted to make sure whatever we did was applicable to every student all over the country. Yeah, so what is a sock? It's not just the thing that I'm currently not wearing on my feet, but they're these set of demos that happen every year. It's been happening since 1999, so I've got a huge legacy to stand on. It's this set of demos that get put in a box and get shipped out to about 100 SPS chapters across the country. And so what's cool about that is that they can then take those demos and do their own outreach, whether that be science days or going into a classroom in their own local communities. And because of this wide outreach, we're able to reach over 500,000 students nationwide, which is crazy, and I just hit a button. We're good. So if I kind of open these kits, they're full of lots of goodies and exciting things. So what was in my kit? I had 3 demos. We're good, that went into my kit this summer. And one was an engineering hot water lab where students were able to heat up water in different ways and see which was the most optimized way going through the scientific process of heating up water. One was an IR proximity detector circuit demo where students are able to hands-on see the effects of a circuit, take it apart, put it back together, and kind of look at IR detection. And then the last one was a everyday measurements lab where students were able to investigate the scientific, the SI units in different ways and kind of see like, what does a cubic centimeter look like? What does it look like for volume, for density, for all these different things? So as you can see, I kind of had a theme, and that theme was, because I was situated at NIST this summer, it was the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which, so if you don't know, NIST is the standards setting agency in the government. And so what they do is making sure that like the gas that you pump at the gas, that volume, you know that that volume is correct. When you weigh your bananas, you know that that weight that you're getting is correct for what you're paying. And so they also have some cool ones. They have a standard peanut butter. That's my favorite. But kind of just embodying this idea of NIST in these kits this summer. So what is the makeup of a demo? I kind of talked a little bit about them, but in my demo, for each demo, we have a write-up for each demo that kind of explains both to the SPS student what's the science behind it, but also how can we explain this to a middle school level so that the general public who is about at a middle school level of science and also any students that you interact with will understand. We also provide all the materials that you need to put on this demo, and also online we include a video showing how to set up and complete the demonstration. For the engineering hot water lab, I also created a lab guideline for students who are doing the lab that takes you through the scientific process all the way from creating a hypothesis to collecting data to analyzing that data and graphing. So they're really able to work through the entire scientific process. So it was one other thing that was cool that we were able to do this summer because we were collaborating with NIST was we were able to collaborate with Manufacturing USA, which is a part of NIST's Modern Makers program. And so as you can see here on this poster, we were able to include 4 of these posters in our kits. And Modern Makers kind of demonstrates people who are doing STEM right now who look like us. So especially as a woman in STEM, it was great to be able to just show these successful women who have jobs that I wouldn't even have thought of, that I can see I'm interested in circuits. I know that Madison is also interested in circuits, and here's a job that I could have. I could be successful like her. And especially for a middle school level, it was important to me that we were really emphasizing those people. Each demo also harkens back to one of the 2025 Modern Makers. So that wasn't the only thing that I did this summer. It wasn't just kits. I also had the opportunity to attend the NIST Middle School Summer Institute, where it was a 2-week-long intensive where middle school teachers from across the country came and learned from NIST scientists. One of them was me. I got to run my demos, which was an incredible opportunity to be able to just kind of see and have feedback from middle school teachers and on like what their students needed. And it was also cool because I was able to help facilitate these other demonstrations as well. I also was able to attend the AAPT summer meeting in Pasadena, California, where I, alongside Naomi Wagner, who was the last year's SPS SOC intern, got to help facilitate the K-12 lounge and kind of create a inclusive community for these K-12 teachers who maybe have not attended a scientific meeting before. I also had the opportunity to, I went too far. I had the opportunity to present. I had an hour-long demonstration where I talked about how we can use art, and specifically comics, to teach physics. So I had 45 people, from undergrads to K-12 teachers to university professors, all drawing comics with me and looking at how we can kind of take these complex topics and boil them down into a visual medium so that we can all learn, because we all learn different ways, and kind of represent our knowledge in a different way. So overall, students are curious and creative. That's what I learned this summer. People are curious and creative. But they only show that if you give them that space to explore. So what I did this summer, and what I hope to continue doing, is giving them that space. Thank you so much. Yay. Yes.
How do you decide what SPS chapters get the boxes? Can they apply for them?
Yeah, so a form will go out, and then you just fill out the form and be like, I want to do, we have this outreach event. I know that this would be really good for my SPS chapter. Can I have one? And they're free, and we'll ship them to you. And all of you guys should request one because they have my really cool art on it, if nothing else. Yeah. Yeah, I drew the box, and I'll put it out there, and you guys can poke through it and see what we have in the box, but this was designed by me. I also have little cow stickers. Yeah, Brad.
What's the strangest fact that you learned this summer?
I don't know, the peanut butter one's kind of weird. I think also just like learning from everyone at NIST, everyone who does science at NIST was incredible because they're like, I do all this science and it's so that we can measure things correctly. And it's like in a ballistics lab or in fire, like they set fire to couches to make sure that they like know the burn time. Like it's incredible what these scientists are doing that you're not even thinking about. And I think just being able to kind of show some of their voices and show some of their creativity through this kit was really cool.
In 1945, a man named Dr. Vannevar Bush talked to the president, and he wrote a book or a report called The Endless Frontier. And he argued that the funding that happened for science during World War II was important both for national security and for the health and welfare of our country. And that argument came together in the form of the National Science Foundation. Today, I'm here to make a similar argument to you. That federal support for basic research is still important. I am Michael Bowe. I'm a rising senior at the University of Richmond and a physics major. So let me tell you about the National Science Foundation. Here's its mission: promote the progress of science. It's here for the health, it's here for the welfare, the economy, and the national security of our nation. Okay, I might just have to ask you to get the next slide. Yeah. Okay, can you hit it again? The National Science Board is where I was placed this summer, National Science Board Office. And they serve as both a governing body for the National Science Foundation and as an advisory body for Congress and the President. They also released the State of the Science and Engineering Indicators Report, which is really important. Most of the statistics that I'm going to show you in this presentation come from that report. As Ethan and Nora talked about, transparency is a lot harder to find than a normal undergraduate expects for the government. Still, and that's why this report is so important. And you'll see that come up a few times. Yeah, I think it's working again. Okay, so basic research. What is basic research? I'm going to go quick in this part because so many of you are scientists. But obviously, it happens before applied research. It happens before experimental development. A product isn't necessarily determined. They don't know how they're going to make money off this. And it generally happens on long time frames. And I really want to emphasize that long time frame piece. So this is the National Science Foundation. This baseline portfolio are papers that are funded by NSF-funded research. And even after isolating for disruptive papers, which are papers that tend to change a field considerably, most papers only have academic footprints, only get cited by other papers, not patents. They're not making a profit. And so the research, the basic research that gets funded in particular, NSF being mostly funding basic research, comes to just more papers. And those papers themselves might get cited. And when they do get cited in a patent, it takes some time still. And by department, it varies a lot. The Department of Energy, being more mission-driven, tends to have, if their papers get cited in a patent, it happens sooner. And then when they get cited in a patent, it still takes another maybe 5 years for the patent to become from a filing to in effect. And so when I'm talking about basic research, this is a long-term investment. Think of this more like an index fund. The money comes in from the federal government, and it's going to take some time to get those rewards. Okay, let me introduce you to the actors. First, industry. They're performing most of the research in the United States. They're performing 77%. And you can see this has been increasing. And this is really important. And they're also funding 75% of the research, 3/4. And the federal government does come in more relevant here, but it's still clearly overwhelmingly industry. And so there is a reasonable question of why am I saying federal support for basic research when industry is running the research economy? And so let me tell you about the federal government. They don't fund and perform a lot of the experimental development, but they do a lot of the basic research. So here's how the federal government splits up their finances. They spend about a quarter in basic research, about a quarter in applied research, and about half in experimental development. And still, industry is clearly funding and performing a lot more of the experimental development. And this is because when industry can see that patent, can see how it can become profitable, they can really help with that last mile, but they struggle more on this basic research before it's clear how the return on investment can come in. But the federal government is in a unique position where they can think on these long time frames. They can see these long time frames, and they're able to help fund and support that. And that's where the federal government is really important. And that's why it has to be the federal government. And to give you another breakdown of what the federal government funding looks like, this is by agency where the money is going. And you can see a lot of it does go to business, and a lot of the NSF in particular goes to higher education. Now, let me tell you about international actors. There is mostly us and China as the global leaders. There are other relevant researchers. If you look by R&D intensity, some smaller countries will come out as really important. But it's important to see China has more doctoral students coming through their pipeline. They're releasing more papers, and they're spending more on R&D research than we are. And this is important. Even though the United States does have some advantages, like most cited journal articles are more likely to be in America, we are spending less money than them. And what you're looking at here is a graph of R&D expenditures, but you're also looking at a national security issue. Think the Cold War, think the nuclear bomb being found in the USSR first. This is important not just for national security, but for the economy. It helps a lot to be in the nation that finds the technology. And we want to make sure that the next big tech, the next AI, the next biotech comes in America. And to give you a quick case study on photovoltaics to show you some of the other advantages of funding basic research, here is the amount of solar energy production in British thermal units, billion British thermal units, and how much we're producing in the United States. And it starts with basic research, and that's where these three things are. It takes the early funding before we can see the advantage. Then it takes good policies by the government to help industry capitalize this in the last stages, and then we get the advantages. We get the solar energy, we get new efficiency levels, and that's one of the advantages, actually getting the power. It's also important to note that the basic research hasn't stopped for photovoltaics. We keep working on that. Even when we're getting the results, even when we're in the experimental development phase, there's another level of basic research that comes through for the next generation. And that's really important to consider. Another benefit we get is talent. William Shockley is an awful person, but he is one of the people who did the foundational work in photovoltaics. And it's important to consider when the funding does come through, it's not just them we're funding them to train students that come next. And these people will also do important research. And we have to consider that when we're funding basic research, that this is a long-term investment for more reasons than just the patent, it's also the people. And it's also the economic benefits. This is all energy, $170 billion from the DOE into research and development for energy. And we now, just in the last year, customers have spent 1.6 trillion. So it's clearly really important to our society and culture now. I mean, look around. And we get considerably more out than we put in. And it also employs a lot of people. And that's all I got. Thank you. Special thank you to the National Science Board Office mentors, AIP for hosting this, and John Mather, because I'm a Mather intern. Yes.
This is kind of a gimme because I already asked you the question, but I think it's important. So how did the firing of the National Science Board affect your summer this year?
Okay, good question. So let me get. The National Science Board was fired before I came into this internship. It happened, for those who don't know, in May. And it had a couple effects. And so most of my work was data analysis. And so it didn't have a large effect on that end because we were still doing good work in the National Science Board Office and preparing things. but it did lead to me working actually 1 day a week at FYI, the journalism group in AIP, so I could continue having a more direct impact on policy, like looking at policies.
Okay, great. Hi, guys. I'm Nicole Everidge. I'm a rising senior at UCLA, and I'm studying astrophysics. And this summer, I got to be the AIP FYI Science Policy News Intern, which was amazing. I had a really great time. And I'm really excited to share my final presentation, which is From Research to Regulation, the Science Policy Connection. I've seen a very big theme with all of our presentations for funding science research, so you're going to get a little more of that. Kind of an overview of what I'm going to go over today is kind of what AIP covers and the importance of AIP FYI. I'm going to talk a lot about how government policy and legislation and, different rules and acts in the government, how that impacts physical science research and education and things in those spheres, and kind of how one impacts the other, and then flip it around and how research impacts government. And then I'm going to be going over what I got to do this summer, as well as what you guys can do. So to start off, something that I was quick to learn is that AIP FYI is a pretty unique publication. To my surprise, not a lot of other publications solely focus on science policy news. You can read a lot of, specific articles about physical science, public policy, or opinionated essays or things of that nature, but there's few other publications that just focus on science policy. And this is really important, not only for the scientists in this room, but AIP FYI does a really good job of making science policy or difficult government processes really digestible for a general audience, which honestly was something useful to me. Even though I have interest in science policy news, something that I'll also go over later in this presentation is the government doesn't always follow their own rules that they set in place, so a lot of legislation can be kind of confusing. And within AIP FYI, AIP, American Institute of Physics, it's focused mainly on physical science research. A lot of stuff that's covered is, medical research or environmental research, and physical science research is actually a very low covered topic in the media. Unless it's science related, there's a lot of science related articles out there, and we do like to cover that, but we also like to focus on things that aren't as widely covered by other organizations. Perfect. On to the next one. And here are some of the organizations we cover. Here are some very popular name brand per se organizations that you've probably heard either your time here at the internship or just out in your public world, from national labs to research universities or other governments and agencies. These are kind of what I'm going to be referring to today when I talk about research organizations. And so you may be wondering, how does the legislation from this government directly impact these organizations, and how do rules and laws and acts and bills play into what research gets done, gets funded, and moves forward? So this is my first infographic of the day, and this kind of gives a very general overview of how a budget gets approved, and got really close, and then it moves through the different organizations. But you may be asking, Nicole, why are there no arrows on your infographic? That is because if I added arrows to this infographic, they would cover the entire page. Like I said before, the government doesn't always follow their rules per se on how funding is allocated or the specific legislative process. So while there is a general move towards the left of how, or right, I gotta flip around. There are so many different arrows for how it can go through. We start with the budget being approved, and it can go straight to some of these agencies and then to projects, or it can go to, a government agency, then a national lab, then to a specific project. Or it can go straight to a university, straight to another project, or it can be allocated in kind of a general, do your research organization. So there's a bunch of different ways that this funding gets spread out amongst all the different research organizations, and we're gonna get a little bit deeper into how it's allocated. So before we do that, we're kind of gonna switch. The last slide was kind of how the government allocates funding to different organizations and how they impact each other. But we can also go backwards. We can start from how researchers impact what kind of legislation or funding allocations get passed. This starts a lot of the time with people voicing their opinion. They'll be like, hey, this is a project that I really want to move forward with. This is a problem that I see, and I need funding research to make it possible. So it kind of moves backwards towards the system. Agencies will propose recommendations for funding budgets, and they can go through the president and then, of course, through Congress to make the final budget decisions. And these decisions are made on a bunch of different factors. What other projects are being processed, if there's any other proposals that they have to take into account, as well as any kind of resources that are available, could impact international relations with other countries. And then, depending on Congress's decision, of course, the money will be allocated and the project will come and impact the public, and kind of the loop starts again. So if we get in deeper into passing certain policies, there are also funding bills. This kind of starts the same way that I've been talking about. The president will propose a budget, Congress will set the framework. Then if we go in a little deeper, appropriation committees can write funding bills to allocate specific budgets. And from there, oh, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Get excited for proposed rules, guys. Should I go back or do you want to go back?
Is that going right?
That was a little further, but it's okay. It's to the pink one, yes. Lovely. Okay, where was I? Then, once these revisions happen, they will go to Congress. And sometimes, not always, Congress and the Senate will pass their own versions of the bill. I say sometimes because, like I said before, unfortunately, these paths aren't really set in stone, and sometimes Congress likes to have their own fun and do their own method of getting these bills through. And then, of course, the president will sign in any final funding bills. And then even deeper within these bills, there can be proposed rules. Again, starting on the left, executive order. Your guys is, yeah, left. Oh my God, I got it. The president or Congress pass a bill, executive order, and again, moving through the relevant agencies. But here, we can have a notice of proposed rulemaking in the Federal Register, and then a public comment period will open, again, sometimes. And then depending on what comments are shared over this public comment period, the agencies can revise the rules based on the public opinion, and sometimes, not always, this can impact the decision of the final rule that is posted to the Federal Register. And so one example of a public comment period that you guys might be aware of was the recent OMB, or Office of Management and Budget, rule about regulation for federal financial assistance. Kind of in short, this kind of allocates different research money to different places, and it caused quite the uproar. People were not pleased about this, and a lot of scientists wanted to share their opinion, how this would impact them or impact their projects. But unfortunately, writing a comment is not really as easy as it seems. Off the top of my head, I kind of thought it was like a YouTube comment, like, great video, but it's a lot more complicated than that. There's a lot of points that you have to hit for your comment to actually be like taken into consideration. A lot of the times there are like caveats to what your comment needs to include. And because this was so popular, I think there were over 500,000 comments on this rule. A lot of people, including AIP, made specific guides on how to publish your own comments and to share your opinion so it actually get considered in these rulings. And the public comment period has ended. It ended earlier this month, but we're gonna see on October 1st if any of the comments really worked, so get excited. And so AIP makes the bridge between all of these government processes and the research that it affects through all the different things that the publication offers. This goes from the weekly newsletter to the monthly, different trackers like the bill tracker and the budget tracker, tracking opportunities and events that are happening that people can attend to learn more information, as well as kind of like what agencies are doing based on pretty much anything that's happening in the government. And these all get updated pretty regularly, so this is top of the line information that's happening now, so you guys can stay up to date. And so during my time in the internship, I got to help out with a lot of these different trackers or newsletters and things like that. And I got to help out by doing a lot of reading, helping draft a lot of the blurbs, radar items, and finding different opportunities, solicitations. We actually have a job page. Someone mentioned before the AIP fellowship. It's listed. So get excited for that too. And I also helped with some of the bill and budget tracking. And this looks like having a lot of tabs open at once. There's a lot, this is like low-key me on a good day. There's a lot of cross-referencing that you have to do. There was a lot of times I had to look in an article and then watch like a YouTube video about a topic and then bring that information together, because we need to kind of drill down these topics into the very basics so people can understand like what they're reading without having to read through like 80 pages of like government jargon. That's kind of difficult to understand. And so what can you do? You guys can stay up to date. I hope you guys are all subscribed to AIP FYI and read the newsletter. You totally should. And always ask questions and share resources with everyone. And you guys can always stay involved, make sure to voice your opinion, engage in debate with others, and of course, interact. You guys should all vote. I know you're all of age to vote, so that's always important. And maybe try your hand at commenting on a rule. That'd be kind of exciting. And a big thank you to the AIP FYI team. I really had a great time this summer, as well as the SPS team and everyone involved in AIP, and all the other interns. Thank you guys so much. Any questions? Are we good? Yes, Amelie. And that's okay.
Okay. It was something about how, like, public outcry or something, research. How
Yes.
research can affect the government.
I think we're talking about the green slide.
Yeah.
So the green slide, it was pretty much about how, like, researchers can be like, hey, like, I have this problem or something I want to fund and research in, and how that can in turn affect government legislation or funding. And there was an example about 2 telescopes that were like kind of in competition to be funded. There was the giant Magellan telescope in Chile and the 30-meter telescope in Hawaii, if I remember correctly. And pretty much a bunch of researchers were like, I want this telescope, no, I want this telescope, and they were arguing, but Congress was like, we can only fund one, like, sorry guys. And Congress doesn't really have the authority to be like, I want this telescope over this one. So that's kind of where a lot of like public opinion came to play. A lot of people were sharing their opinions, like, I think this telescope should be funded because X, Y, and Z. And they're like, no, you're wrong, this one's more important. And so a lot of the public outcry, as you said, affected a lot of like the middle steps here where like different recommendations were being made and reports were being written up to kind of go to the higher ups to make the final decisions. And it ended up with the giant Magellan telescope being funded thanks to the public outcry. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Bailey Wolf. I'm a recent graduate from the Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Prescott, and I am the Math or Science Policy Intern here at NIST. And today I'm going to be talking to you guys about digital twins and how they were kind of used in the Manufacturing USA network. So first of all, I have to talk about what a digital twin is exactly. A digital twin is a digital representation or a simulation of a physical process that we have. And it's dynamically updated with data from its physical twin. And from the dynamic version, you get the predictive capability. And it creates this feedback loop where you can feed information in from the physical to the digital, and then the digital feeds information back into the physical. The bidirectional interaction between this, creating this feedback loop, is very important to the digital twin, and it's what sets it apart from everything else. And an example of this is a digital reefs. This is an NSF project where divers put sensors into coral reefs around the world, and they were able to create simulations of these digital coral reefs. And from that, we can kind of determine where the coral reefs are going to be headed in the next 15 to 20 years. Is this coral reef going to die, or is it going to thrive and survive? And if this coral reef is going to die, then we can take action on this and save it before it actually happens. So here's some more background on digital twins. On the left, we have a digital model. Everyone has made a digital model at some point. It's just a digital representation of, say, this microphone that we have. Where a digital shadow is, let's say I hook sensors up to this microphone and I feed information into the digital version of my microphone. The problem is I can't do anything with that data. It's just being fed into my simulation, and that's it. Well, a digital twin is, let's say I have these sensors and they're getting fed into my simulation of this microphone, and now I can actually act on this information. Let's say that this microphone is getting heated up. Well, I can use the predictive capability of my digital twin to tell when the melting point of this microphone and when it's going to start to melt. And those are kind of some of the differences. Well, this is really important, and we can use this in the manufacturing industry for a whole lot of purposes. The predictive capability is really important for quality control, and I will talk about that a little later. But now I have to talk about the Manufacturing USA Network. Now, I know Ethan has kind of talked about this already, but I'm just going to preface that the Manufacturing USA Network is it's a series of 17 institutes, and they do all sorts of manufacturing across the United States. And they all utilize digital twins in some sort of preface or purpose. And as I was doing my research on these Manufacturing USA institutes and how they were using the digital twins, I started to notice some patterns. And I kind of split them into 4 categories. We have standardization and interoperability. We have implementation and automation. We have workforce development, and we have quality control. So talking about standardization and interoperability, one of the biggest challenges with digital twins is that every company is making their own digital twin using their own frameworks, file systems, naming conventions, and formats. Well, if you wanted to take, say, a digital twin from one company and plug it into the other company, you can't do that because they have their own file formats and everything. So we need to figure out a way to standardize these processes so that we can plug and play with one digital twin to the next. And a big example of this is SESME. They are creating the Smart Manufacturing Profiles and i3X, which is basically a standardized file formatting system for your digital twins. And another example would be implementation and automation. Now, this is the most common method that we are using for digital twins. The institutes do these through project calls, which is collaborations between academia, government, and industry. And basically, they identify a technology gap in anything, basically, and they send a call out to academia, industry, and government, and then they collaborate and fix this technology gap. And some of these project calls utilize digital twins. Now, one of the more impactful examples is MXD's project on ventilator adaptation. So during the pandemic, there was a big problem. There weren't enough ventilators for the amount of patients that were in these hospitals. So we needed to find a way to fix this. So we MXD hooked a digital twin up to a ventilator, and they were able to create a splitter that was able to split airflow from not just one patient, but to 2 patients at the same time. And that effectively doubled the amount of patients that we can hook up to ventilators. And this saved many lives during COVID-19 or in the pandemic. Okay, and the next way that we are using digital twins is through workforce development. The digital twin is a very new concept to manufacturing still, and many people don't know about it. So the institutes are working on creating workforce development training programs to help people teach about digital twins so that the next generation of manufacturers can hit the ground running. And one of the most common examples of this is the BOT-DT training program through Nimble. This is basically a simulated biopharmaceutical testing ground where you can simulate disease outbreaks, and we can see if our disease, whatever you use to cure a disease, will actually work. I don't know much about biopharmaceuticals, so I'm going to stay away from that. But and the last way that I was able to find digital twins being used is quality control. So the predictive capability of the digital twin allows for defects and performance issues of your product to be found before they even occur. And one of the best ways I found of this happening was MXD's project call on modernizing TNT manufacturing. So the last generation of TNT operators, they were really good at their jobs, but now they're kind of transitioning into retirement. So we need to get the new generation of TNT operators up to date. But they don't want to do this job because pouring TNT into a vat is not something that people would really want to do. So we're hooking sensors up to the TNT basins, and we can figure out the exact amount of TNT needed for your vats so that the TNT actually provides the correct explosive blast every single time, what you're looking for. And we can do that before it's even created. And that's how we were able to do that. So in conclusion, I would say that a digital twin is a digital representation of a physical counterpart. And I kind of found 4 patterns: standardization and interoperability, implementation and automation, teaching the next generation of manufacturers, and improving quality control among these four, among the institutes. And I would say that digital twins are the future of manufacturing and that these institutes are at the forefront of advancing them. And I would just like to say thank you to the OAM team and my mentor Mahesh, as well as EIP, for doing this. It's awesome. Biopharmaceutical manufacturing?
Do we have questions?
I was curious, so you mentioned that the distinction between a digital model and a digital twin is the automatic data transfer from the model back to the physical world as opposed to the manual one.
Yep.
So like in an example like that digital reef you showed, what's the mechanism for that automatic data transfer from the model back to the physical environment that is being modeled?
So the way I understand it with the digital reefs is that divers will hook sensors up to the ground. They're like temperature, pressure, barometric sensors. And those sensors get, they transmit data into the virtual counterpart, which is like a big computer, basically. And then through the predictive capability of the machine, you're able to kind of simulate what is going to happen to this digital reef over time. And then from that, we can act on the physical one. Does that make more sense?
I'm still not clear on how that's different from a model then.
Well, okay, a model would just be, it would just be like you can't predict anything with your model. Like it's just a digital version of your reef. You can't tell it to do anything, and we can't act on that. That's kind of the difference. I don't know if that makes more sense, but.
Hi everybody, my name is Paige Nolan. I am this year's Space Telescope Science Institute intern, and I am a rising junior at the University of Maryland. Today I will be telling you guys about all of the research that I have done this summer, specifically a MUSE study of the nearby blue compact dwarf galaxy NGC 625. I wanted to give you guys a little bit of background on how galaxies are classified. If you look all the way to the left, you have your elliptical galaxies. These are rounder, more oval in shape, and they typically have older stars. In the middle here, we have spiral galaxies. As I'm sure many of you know, our very own Milky Way is classified as a spiral galaxy. They are defined by their spiral arms, and they have a mixture of both old and young stars throughout the galaxy. Over here on the right side, we have our irregular galaxies. As you may be able to infer by the name, these galaxies are unusually or irregularly shaped, and they may contain dust or gas, which is good for star formation. Under this last classification of irregular galaxies, we have our blue compact dwarf galaxies, the star of our show. These galaxies are nearby small, irregularly shaped galaxies that are defined by the low metallicity and high star formation rate, which makes them excellent local analogs for high redshifted or early universe galaxies. My galaxy, NGC 625, falls under this blue compact dwarf classification. We basically wanted to look at the characteristics of NGC 625, and those characteristics will be able to tell us kind of what these early universe or high redshifted galaxies also look like. NGC 625 is about 12.7 million light years away, and it has a redshift of 0.001321. Throughout the summer, I mainly used this technique, integral field unit spectroscopy, or IFU spectroscopy. Essentially what it does is it captures a full light spectrum for every single pixel across a 2D field of view, and it creates a 3D data cube by combining imaging and spectroscopy. So I included this image here for you guys to get a better visualization of what that looks like. On this X and Y axis, you'll have your image of your galaxy or your object, and then on this lambda axis, you'll have the spectrum that it captures for every pixel. My data comes from the Multi-Unit Spectroscopic Explorer, otherwise known as MUSE, located at the Very Large Telescope in Chile. This telescope is an optical and infrared telescope with interferometry, and my data range, wavelength range, ranges from about 4,600 angstroms to 9,350 angstroms. This goes from the blue end of the optical range into the infrared range. Over here, I have an image taken by the Hubble Space Telescope of my galaxy. These kind of darker spots in the middle specifically are my galaxy, and the green box outlines the field of view of my MUSE dataset. So everything within that green box there is the data that I used over the summer. So here I have the blue side of the optical spectrum for my galaxy. All of the blue dashed lines here indicate different emission lines throughout the galaxy. I specifically have a few highlighted in red boxes. Those are the main emission lines that I focused on during my research and the main emission lines that I used to create different maps and whatnot. The same thing for the red. And I also mapped the infrared section as well. We did not use any of the emission lines in this section. We just didn't need them for this analysis at this moment. And if you're wondering what all of these downward spikes are, those are telluric absorption lines, which are basically unwanted lines in astronomy. We don't really use them right now for this project at all. They can be caused by temperature, humidity, ozone content, and more. So here I've created an H-alpha zeroth moment map. This basically shows the total intensity of the H-alpha emission line. As you can see, there are kind of three distinct bright yellow regions there. Those correspond to the dense H2 regions, and that tells us a lot about what areas have a lot of star formation going on. Here I've made line ratio maps, so this takes the intensity of different emission lines and tells you the ratio between them. So the H-alpha H-beta emission line ratio map tells us about dust extinction throughout the galaxy, and then the S2 doublet emission line ratio map tells us about electron density distribution throughout the galaxy. All of these emission line ratio maps were used to create these maps, the BPT diagram and the VO87 diagram, and this tells us about the ionization mechanisms throughout the galaxy. So I'm actually going to move to this side to point things out. So as you can see, I've plotted two different lines. The dashed line here is the Kaufman line, so everything below and to the left of this line, those are regions that have photoionization as their main ionization mechanism. Everything above this solid black line, called the Cooley line, all of those are non-photoionization mechanisms. Everything between the two lines could be either ionized due to photons or due to things such as shocks. The VO87 diagram essentially shows the same thing with the Cooley line plotted as well. In addition to those, I created metallicity maps. From the integrated spectrum of the three main H2 regions that I've circled in both of my maps, I used indirect methods to determine the metallicity of those regions. All of these equations to determine the metallicity were found from this 2004 paper. So I found a metallicity of 8.213 using the N2 indirect method and a metallicity of 8.180 using the O3N2 method. To give you guys a little bit of context, I believe that the sun's metallicity is about 8.68 or 8.69 dex, and that is a very big difference. So there's a lot less oxygen abundance in this galaxy. As you can see from the maps as well, there is also a lot of spatial variation in oxygen abundance. So this is an ongoing work. My next steps are to reduce data from the Gemini South telescope for further analysis. This data will include wavelengths that MUSE does not cover, and that will allow me to estimate metallicity in a more robust way. Me and my mentor plan on writing a paper with a full analysis using both the Gemini South and the MUSE datasets as well. Special thank you to my mentor, Dr. Kumari, the SPS team, and all of the SPS interns and the AIP team. Thank you. Yes?
So the Phoenix Galaxy galaxy is really cool because it's got like the low mass background and like the high mass, like really active bursters that are short lived. But you commented at the very end on that there was low oxygen content. I might have missed it, but do you know why?
In this galaxy?
Yeah.
So I guess the why is going to be explained further more in the paper. Also, I'm unaware, or I'm not very caught up on the Phoenix galaxy at least.
It was the NGC 625.
NGC 625?
Yeah, that's the name for it. That was another name for it.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
Oh, just, you said low oxygen.
Yeah.
So could you walk me through like why you say low oxygen?
Yeah, there's probably, so I say there's low oxygen because there's likely not a lot of, so let me start by saying oxygen abundance comes from a lot of star formation. So early universe galaxies will have a lot of gases like hydrogen and helium, and through more star formation, you'll get more oxygen. And so that's essentially what's happening here. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Sierra Ficazio. I was the APS Public Engagement Intern. I just graduated from Appalachian State University in North Carolina. So this summer I worked at APS, the American Physical Society. It's a part of AIP. I worked here in the DC office. APS focuses on communicating with scientists who go on to communicate with the public. The common theme that I worked on this summer was science communication, which is important to advocate for the advancement of science, and not only to promote science communication, but also to include everyone in science, because science relates to everybody. And so science communication is really about creating a space where everyone has a place in science and is part of the conversation relating to science. And so this summer I worked on 2 different projects. I worked on a dashboard project with the public engagement team, part of public affairs, and they focus on the connection between scientists and the public, training scientists to interact with the public. And I also worked on a tech tree project with the government affairs team, who focuses on scientists interacting with policymakers and government officials. The first project I worked on was the dashboard project. The goal of this project was to take all of the data that we had from all of the different public engagement programs. We focused on 4 different programs: the Juniper program, Science Trust Project, Physics Quest, and Physicists to Go. These are 4 of the programs of public engagement that we focused on putting into a centralized dashboard for internal use. And so before this summer, all of the data was spread out across multiple spreadsheets in a lot of different folders of a Google Drive. And so there wasn't really any organization to anything before. And it made it hard for our team to map different goals that they had and to track different information, because nothing was really easy to interpret, because it was just numbers on spreadsheets and nothing was organized. And so the goal was to take all of the data of different spreadsheets, organize it, and then turn it into an interactive virtual dashboard that made it easy to track different metrics and goals. So the process for creating this dashboard, we started with SMART goals, which, if you're not familiar with SMART goals, it's goals that are really specific and measurable, and they happen in a time-bound period that's obtainable. And so we have a list of SMART goals for each of the different public engagement programs. And so that was the first thing, is I went through all of the different SMART goals that we had, and connected it to all of the spreadsheets and organized the spreadsheets that we had in different areas to see which data we needed to pull and how we wanted to represent the data in the dashboard. And so this is a circular diagram of the ways that we measure goals in public engagement. So they start with SMART goals. They go and collect data from different programs and events. They measure different outputs and different outcomes, and then the outcomes that they have feed back into the next cycle's SMART goals. And so just having data on spreadsheets is not very helpful for determining what SMART goals they should have for the next cycle. And so creating a dashboard that was interactive and showed a visual representation of data and how it changes over time was very helpful in creating, for our team, in creating new SMART goals for the next area. This is a screenshot of one of the pages of the virtual dashboard. So on this dashboard that I created, there's 5 pages. There's a home page that shows general public engagement data for all of the different programs. And then there's links to 4 different pages for those 4 specific public engagement programs. This is an example of what one of the pages looks like. This is from the Science Trust Project. And it has data and graphs from the Ambassador Program, as well as the SDP Summit and general Science Trust Project data. And this is a sample of just what some of the pages look like from the dashboard. Right now, all of the spreadsheets and data that gets automatically updated after different events is all fed into a master spreadsheet that I created, which feeds into this dashboard. So as new events are happening and data is added to the existing spreadsheets, this dashboard will update automatically. And so like new dates will be added and new data will get added automatically. There's also a filter to filter by date. So if they want to look at all of the metrics for 1 year or 1 quarter, it's easy to do that. The next project I worked on was tech trees. And if you're not familiar with tech trees, this is something that the Public Engagement and Government Affairs team has created to promote the importance of scientific funding and to show how science can relate to everyday life. So a tech tree follows this pathway. It goes from a foundational research topic, and it goes across a timeline and shows connected research and then modern day applications. So while working on tech tree projects, I worked on 3 different tasks. The first task that I worked on was for the AIP Venture Fund, and we refer to this as the AIP Influencer Campaign among our team. And this was a campaign that we worked on. We partnered with influencers for 4 different target states that we were looking at. And we created stories and research for these influencers to use and create videos to promote research to their communities, to an audience who could see themselves in these projects. And so this is an example of one of the ones that I put together. This was from Tennessee. And so this is a story that gets passed to an influencer from Tennessee who creates content on things like technology or computer science. And this is a story that they would read and use to create a video and some content to promote to their audiences. Another thing that I worked on with the Tech Tree team was international impact stories. And this was where a member of our team went to Capitol Hill and he talked to policymakers for international policymakers, where he was promoting the importance of international students coming to America and contributing to American science and research. So this was one of the stories that I wrote and collected research on. We sent about 5 or 6 of them to Capitol Hill. These focused on students who were not born in the United States. They came to the United States for secondary education or their PhD program and ended up staying in the United States and contributing to an American research project that had a really big impact on our society. The third project I worked on with tech trees was I built my own tech tree. We currently have about 20 tech trees made, and in the coming years, the goal is to have over 100 made. And so one that I created was on super absorbent polymers. And that began with research like wood pulp and paper making. It has modern day applications like menstrual products, diapers, Kleenex, tissues, things like that. And so there's a lot that goes into building a tech tree. Creating just this, as well as a full-out explanation for each of these nodes, takes about 8 to 12 hours to create this. This is an example of one of the very early stages of creating a tech tree. This is just a written-out timeline that shows the year, the location, what it is, and whether it was funded privately or federally, because the purpose of tech trees is to promote the importance of funding science. this is an example of what a final tech tree could look like. This is a product that's going on to things like postcards or getting pushed out to teachers. This is a final product of a memory foam tech tree. So the tech tree that I created is not in this final stage yet. But this is an example of what a final product could look like. So final products could look like something like this, where it's in like an infographic, or a final product is also things like the videos that the influencers are making for their social media audiences. Okay. Thank you to my mentors as well as everyone else on my teams who guided me, even though they were not my mentors. Any questions?
Yeah, so will these tech trees be available to the public, or do you have to be an APS member to see them? And would they be searchable and have like links to papers or anything like that?
So currently the plan is to, like, the long-term goal is to have it available to everyone, like teachers, scientists, public, whoever wants to be able to use them. We actually just submitted a grant for the AIP Venture Fund to get more funding to continue this project in the coming years. And one of the applications that we're trying to create is an interactive like website where you can search through all of the tech trees and be able to find them for whatever use you want to use them for. And so I think our next steps are to introduce it to scientists and to be used internally, and then if that goes well and we get feedback on that, to promote it externally. I'm actually going to a conference in November to promote the use of tech trees and introduce it to scientists for kind of a first round of feedback.
Okay, so hi everyone, I am Thomas. I'm the USGS intern this summer, working with Dr. Huck Lee this summer, and I'm a little bit nervous, so let's start. And my work is about infrared spectroscopy analysis of oil shale samples before and after extractions. So let's start. Let me show you some background first. So previous experiments have already proved that salinity can affect petroleum productivity and the properties of oil shale residues. And what I want to do is to compare residues before and after extractions to determine how retained petroleum influence their chemical signals. To study that, I want to use infrared spectroscopy and multi-peak fitting to calculate and analyze the branching ratio, A factor, and C factor of those samples. I know it's pretty confusing right now. I will reach that later. So first, let's begin from the very beginning of the program. Let's meet Wally, Eve, and Ferris. And so at the very beginning is the sample preparation. I start from the PMMA and the sample powders. And Wally and Eve help me to make them into pellets, and Ferris helped me to polish them. And that's what I get. Yeah, that's the sample pellets I used. And then in total, we get like 24 in total. So now let's make some measurements. So the left side is the diamond ATR, and the right side is the germanium ATR. The main difference of them are they are using different crystals. And they are all using to get the infrared spectrum, which looks like that. So this is one example, and it's 5 measurements in total. So, and they actually looks the same quietly. So, and this spectrum is from 600 to 6,000 wave numbers. But actually, what we actually want is just in the two red circle. Where's another one? Yeah. So let's zoom in. So the left one you can see is from 1,500 to 1,800 wave number, which contains carbonyl carbon and aromatic carbon. And the right one starts from 2,800 to 1,300 wave number, which is about the methyl family. Then we can use those peaks, the height of the peak, to calculate those characters I just said before, which is the branching ratio, A factor, and C factor. So the branching ratio is the relative contribution of methyl and methylene, and the A factor is the aromatic carbon contribution, and then the C factor is about carbonyl related and aromatic contributions in this case. And that's the bond I used. So what we get is this raw data table. This is one out of 6 sample groups. So this sample named Condor, and I know it's just random numbers for most of you guys, and let's make them into diagram. So this is what we can see. So in this sample group, the branching ratio is increasing after extractation, while the A factor is decreasing after extractation. The C factor is most confusing. It's change at any time. It's change all the time. So as I said, it's 1 out of 6. So let's make other 6. And the table left is just the 6 raw data table, and the picture at right is the 6 sample looks like. Their difference is shown here, which they are from different time, different area. For example, Condor sample group is from Queensland, Australia, and it's like 56 to 34 million years ago. And this is the precise data we can get, show that in each sample group, how the branching ratio, A factor, C factor changes. However, it's still very noisy for most of you. Let's make it look better. So I calculate the average change for each sample group, and that diagram makes sense, right? And so for the branching ratio, I found it's increasing after extractation for all the sample groups in average. And luckily for A factor, it's decreasing after extractation, while the C factor is the most confusing because it's 5 of them is decreasing and 1 is increasing. And that's because some crazy samples in the sample group. Then I also calculate the differences between the diamond ATR and germanium ATR. So as prediction, they should be the same because we are using the same sample, but honestly, it looks very awful. And what I can tell is that the germanium ATR has very large error compared with the diamond ATR. That's maybe the reason why it caused this, and why and where the error comes from. Mostly it's water from the lab atmosphere. So looks like this is a general peak looks like. You see the nice peaks and the belly. So what will happen with water? All the peaks disappear, and it became a straight line. And I can do nothing. I can find no peaks here. So that is what happened. And this is the whole spectrum. You can see the large peak at 3,000, which is just water. I can do nothing. So basically, that's the main error I caused. And to summarize, I'm gonna talk about what I made as outcome. So in the program, I made 24 sample palettes. I made 390 measurements for 78 samples. And also I write a 16 pages final report. I also playing with liquid nitrogen and make the lab a little bit foggy, which look like that. Okay. So yeah, to summarize, actually what we found at last is just, so the branching ratio is decreasing is increasing after the extractation, while the A factor is decreasing, and the C factor 5 out of 6 is decreasing, 1 is increasing. So, thank you very much. That's all I have. And special thanks to Paul, Jevin, and SPS team, USGS. Thank you very much. And SPS team.
Questions?
Oh yeah. Any questions? Oh yes, please.
So if you are in a lab in like Florida or Texas and you have a lot of humidity, what are your mitigation strategies for reducing?
I think. Well, that's a question I'm thinking about. Well, ask the environment to be better. And so it's what I'm thinking is to find a day with a less humidity and like 50%. When I do that crazy samples, the humidity is like 70 to 90%, which is the main reason called that crazy samples. And if like the humidity is, and if the environment is terrible, maybe it's a good way that you do not breathe during that measurement time, because your breathing is giving evaporating water. Yeah.
Okay, so I brought about 60 slides. It should be fine. So I just want to say thank you to everybody. So first, let's do a round of applause for everybody that spoke today. Interns, you did a fantastic job. And so I hope that your time here was impactful. I hope that you made friendships, and I hope that you each took something with you from the summer that'll impact and help you for the rest of your life. While we're here, there's a lot of people that supported you over the summer, a lot of people that either financially, time, effort, making sure that everything arrived on time. So let's do a round of applause for all the mentors and everyone that made this internship possible. And I just wanted to say that there's lots of great internships. You all are going to go off into the world and you're going to do amazing things. But the friendships that you made with each other, you should look at each other right now, like, and kind of memorize this moment, because these people are going to be in your life for the rest of your life. You've not just made friends, you've made colleagues, you've made connections, and you never know when those connections are going to meet back up. One of my friends often says that there's no goodbyes in science, there's just until I see you next time. So I advise you to kind of like crystallize this moment and make it a core memory of you're sitting here in AIP, you did this internship, and there's lots of great things in front of you. So I just wanted to say congratulations. You've completed the end of your summer internship. It may feel a little surreal. And don't let the connections go away, because they're the one thing that you'll take with you for the rest of your life. So have a great rest of the summer, and I hope that we get to see you again sometime soon. Goodbye. And then I think now it's logistics and involves some sort of carbon-based thing.
Thank you so much, Brad. Thank you all. All of you interns did wonderful jobs. I can really tell that you guys worked on your presentations after practice yesterday. You guys did amazing.